Greetings adventurers, and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. Building characters can be a really fun way to kill time in between your D&D sessions. The endless possibilities of a character sheet allow you to make tons of different characters who you hope one day can be part of your campaign. It gets so addicting that sometimes I secretly hope that my character dies so I can play the next one. I guess that's why I eventually found myself as a dungeon master, just because I finally would get a chance to play all of them in one form or another. It does make it hard though when your party instantly decides to kill or hate on one of your favorite NPCs, and now you have to go back to the drawing board. Oh well, guess I'll just make another clumsy goblin for the party to adopt. Today's video is sponsored by CZEPEKU. When I made this YouTube channel, these guys were the sponsor that I wanted to have because I'm a longtime fan, and they've made my campaign preparation so much easier. You may already support them on Patreon because they make fantastic maps, scenes, and tokens. But did you know that they're all available now for the price of 2 subscriptions in one single bundle? Use the link below to grab the CZEPEKU Complete Fantasy Bundle and get 6,000 battle maps, 2,000 fantasy scenes, and 300 tokens that can be tweaked using their amazing token builder, meaning endless possibilities. Plus, more content is added every week. You can put together just about any scenario using this bundle in minutes, and treat your party to beautiful hand-drawn assets that will blow them away. If you want to help support the channel, or you just want to use this amazing art on screen for your next game, click the link in the description below and support the bundle today. Now let's get back to the story. And I definitely advise you not to have the mentality that this Dungeon Master has in today's treasure, which goes by the name Edgy DM refuses to let a level 4 party have character sheets. This story takes place a few years back, around 2017 I want to say, when I was still in high school. I was invited along with a group of friends of mine to a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons group hosted by a friend of ours. Our group consisted of Fighter, an animal hybrid of sorts, the only one in the party keeping us alive with prior game knowledge, Warlock, a Yuan-Ti, my boyfriend at the time, me, a Centaur Bard, and finally our party's Dungeon Master, and the problem. Now, I had known the Dungeon Master for a few years up until that point. She was a decent enough friend, a bit toxic at times, which will become all but apparent soon enough, but overall we got along at the time. First thing I should mention is that we were all new to Dungeons & Dragons at the time. Apart from the Fighter, none of us had ever played before, including the Dungeon Master. This being our first time playing, we all missed a bunch of huge red flags about the campaign. First off, before we started the session, she told us not to make our own characters as she had already written them. Alright, we thought, most of us didn't even know how to build a character. She must have done this to avoid a lot of confusion at the first session. Oh, how wrong we were. We all arrive at the session and she hands us blank character sheets. We all kind of looked at each other, confused, and asked if she had given us the right sheet. She proudly stated, "Those are your correct character sheets because you all have amnesia." She wanted us to figure out everything that was meant to be on our character sheet on the fly. Class, health, stats, spells, equipment. Heck, we didn't even know what race we were. In order to figure that out, we had to roll a perception check. We rolled low, and I guess you just have to take her word for it that your perception check isn't high. Yeah, that already is kind of a red flag. So for the entirety of the first session, we had no idea what we were, who we were, or what we were meant to do. All we know was that one of us had 4 legs, one of us had no legs, one of us had fur, and the last of us had scales. But despite our low rolls, we did know one thing. My character had huge breasts. Yeah, it was kind of an open secret that the Dungeon Master was bi, and that's all well and good, but she tried to fetishize anything related to big-chested women and gay men, which did annoy me in Warlock, things like constantly asking who was top or bottom, etc. But we thought nothing of it at the time. Role-playing a female character seemed interesting at the time, and I wanted to see where it would go. So the entirety of the first session was spent surviving on an island we woke up on. At a certain point, we decided to send half the party to make camp, and the other half to find food. I know, dumb idea to split the party, but we didn't know any better. See, me and the Fighter built camp, and Paladin and Warlock went hunting. This is really when the poop show started to rear its ugly head. At a certain point, Paladin and Warlock stumbled upon a wild boar and decided to make that dinner. And honestly, a lot of it was purely due to bad rolls, but they were losing hard. After 15 minutes of trying to hit the thing with weapons we didn't understand how to use, the Dungeon Master up and angrily says, "You guys are level frickin' 4. How are you losing to a boar?" Fighter, who has played before, shot his eyes open in surprise. The rest of us had no idea how bad this was for us. Not only did we not know how anything works, we already had our subclasses, feats, etc. selected for us, and had no idea what any of them are or how they work. Not to mention that 75% of the people at the table were spellcasters who didn't know that they could cast spells. It was a bad show all around. After another few minutes, the boar is dead and they returned to the rest of us who had made camp, and that's where the first session ended. Next week rolled around and we all took some time to learn more of the rules and realized that we should probably at least know our stats so that we can properly know what modifiers to add to our weapons and ability checks. So we asked the Dungeon Master, to which he promptly said, "No, it'll break the immersion of my story." Great. Yeah, I want to say we're already off to a really bad start here. The fact that the Dungeon Master is treating you like you're metagaming for knowing the basic stats is kind of crazy. Even in a true amnesia scenario, maybe the very first time you make a stat, you're going in completely blind and they say, hey, by the way, make a perception check. This is the modifier you add, which means you're actually, this stat, and you kind of work backwards. So very early on, maybe the first strength check is completely blind, and then the first dex check is completely blind. And then over the course of the session, everyone's going to try to do one activity at least once, and then maybe, who knows, people get excited and say, oh yeah, by the way, you're really good at lockpicking, so next time we're going to have you do it. And weren't you really good at perception? We're going to let you scout ahead. I get it kind of working in my head, but for a new Dungeon Master, you're biting off way more than you can chew. There is probably totally a way to make the amnesia thing work. I'd recommend starting them off at level 1, especially because they're new players, and building the whole first dungeon is almost like a tutorial. And that's why, at least right now, I don't want to be too harsh on the Dungeon Master for trying something clever at the amnesia trick, but the complete hostility to people who just want to learn how to play their classes is super frustrating. There are way better ways to do this. Apart from the fact that we couldn't honestly know what we rolled, the session was going overall pretty well, until near the end. We were walking through a pathway in the forest when we were suddenly attacked by 2 Medusas. The fighter's eyes shot open again. Seriously, he asked? Yeah, but don't worry, the Dungeon Master stated. You'll be fine. The fight starts and we're getting creamed. Surprisingly, we dodged the petrifying gazes long enough to get some hits in, but due to there being 3 spellcasters not casting spells, we weren't doing much damage. At some point, the Dungeon Master noticed and was getting frustrated at us. Why aren't you all doing anything? The Dungeon Master asked. We reply, what do you mean? We're attacking as best as we can. Dungeon Master, you all are level 4. You can obviously deal more damage than just hitting them wildly. It was at this point that I noticed the fighter getting annoyed. Fighter, yeah, no crap, but we don't know what we can do, so how do we do anything other than that? The Dungeon Master started getting really mad as well. Dungeon Master, well, it would break the immersion if I just told you, she shouted. After a few minutes of arguing between the two, she finally goes, fine, you know what? A meteor falls on top of one of the Medusas. There. Happy? We were kind of at a loss for words. We tried to calm them down and eventually got them to settle. The game continued and we managed to kill the Medusa. Luck was on our side, I guess. Well, a meteor was on your side. Afterwards, we stopped to try to lick our wounds. Before we got the chance to take a short rest, we were immediately attacked by a Merilith. A frickin' Merilith. Suffice to say, we got knocked down before the end of the initiative, and we wake up in a cell with a couple of guards watching us. Session 2 ends. So at this point, the Dungeon Master, while not being a good Dungeon Master, hasn't done anything super red flaggy. But oh boy, this is where the story goes from bad to worse. Hasn't done anything red flaggy. Okay, you're being way too nice even in retrospect. And yes, I know someone's going to point out that there can't be 2 Medusas because obviously Medusa's a person and it would be 2 Gorgons. But for some reason, Dungeons & Dragons decided to make Gorgons something completely different. The problem isn't necessarily 2 Gorgon/Medusas fighting the party that's level 4. There's a lot of ways that you can balance encounters to be interesting even if the threat's too powerful. The problem really is that the party is punching way below their current weight class because they have no idea what their abilities are. So I don't get how this Dungeon Master can pride themselves on immersion and then use a meteor to strike one of them to balance the encounter, instead of just simply having narrative that helps the party understand better what they're good at. Like for example, the Warlock does have a patron. Maybe the Dungeon Master can kind of hint at him how they can contact their patron, and then their patron talks about the dark gifts that they provide and maybe teaches them again how to do one of their spells they've forgotten about. Or maybe the Paladin sees something that reminds him of the oath he's sworn and it's almost like baked into him, and subconsciously he's like, I know that this means a lot to me, and feels their weapon glow a little bit and like reteaches them how to do smite. There are so many ways that you can treat these encounters as a learning tutorial like experience. And again, I keep having to harp on the fact that they're level 4. If you wanted the party to discover how to do something step after step, why not start them at level 1? That way there's only a couple things they'd have to discover, and then when they get to level 2 it feels very natural, and then they have to blindly discover how to do those things, and keep going from there. Level 4, they have a whole bunch of stuff, and they're just really grasping at straws. I'm also a little kind of irritated that the fighter is the veteran of the group. They literally gave the person with the most intuitive knowledge the class that just hits things a bunch of times. It's like they're intentionally making it so that no one can metagame, and by metagame I mean pick a class and then actually get to play it. This is some kind of power trip. Let's continue. The next session starts and we're in prison. We're slowly getting our bearings and trying to talk to the guards. No response. So I try to persuade them to let us out. I still don't know that I'm a bard. Nat 20. The Dungeon Master looks at me and sneers. She describes, despite your attempts to speak with the guards, they ignore you. You become so frustrated that you flash your boobs at them in an attempt to seduce them. I reply, what? I asked them before being interrupted. Before anyone can react, you feel a smack to your face as the only female guard stares at you angrily. She then begins chastising me in character for being a slut. I'm in complete shock. I just wanted to talk to them, I protested. Well, you already flashed them. Can't go back now. She continues to yell at me and at some point goes, wait, Valis? Yeah, it turns out this NPC was an old ally of our group and slowly became the bane of our campaign. After 2 full sessions, we were finally handed our proper character sheets and finally figured out exactly how stupid we must have looked during our fights. We learned that we were mercenaries of sorts for an empire that we never got to see. The campaign fell apart before we could. This NPC immediately joined our group and became that kind of DMPC. She was a beautiful blood hunter dark elf that everyone else threw themselves over, aka the Dungeon Master's Mary Sue. And boy, was it just as much fun as it sounds. Every interaction from this point on turns into the DMPC talking to the NPCs by herself and pushing us out of every social interaction. After about a half an hour of this happening, we slowly started to check out, and the more we do, the angrier the Dungeon Master gets. At a certain point, we had to head into a cave for some reason that I honestly can't remember. After a bit of walking through an empty cavern, she says, before we realize what's going on, 3 4-headed hydras start to approach and attack. Fighter shoots up and shouts, wait, what? Are you going to try to kill us? Well, the Dungeon Master explains, if you had been paying attention, you would have noticed them and could sneak around them. But since you weren't, it's a fight. Nah, Warlock pipes up. That's pretty BS. Yeah, there's no way that we wouldn't have noticed 3 giant hydras in the middle of an empty cavern. After a couple minutes of intense arguing, I asked Warlock to take me home, as I didn't want to just sit here and argue, and we left. After that night, I didn't have another session with that Dungeon Master due to some stuff in my personal life, but I did invite some of the other players to join a campaign I started Dungeon Mastering, and we've been playing happily ever since. TLDR, Dungeon Master gives us the bare minimum for a campaign and gets mad at us for being confused and not having fun. Man, this story really has just about everything awful all wrapped into one in the end there. The fact that there's a Blood Hunter DMPC that gets to be the main character, and I'm sure would have killed all the hydras if the party had just continued that session. The fact that no one got to have a win like ever, even the person who finds out that they're playing a bard rolling a nat 20 isn't able to do a basic social interaction with someone who ends up being their friend. Also, is anyone else just confused why the amnesia gets wiped out completely when they meet this special NPC? Like, does she go down the line and say, hey, you're that bard who has this stat in strength, this stat in dexterity, goes down the entire list, says their entire spell list and, other class features, and then goes to the next person and says, hey, aren't you that warlock that has this stat list and these spells and all these things? Like, what about meeting this NPC besides the fact that the Dungeon Master thinks they're super awesome, makes it so that this is the moment where they get to write literally anything on their sheet? I was really trying to hold off my complete criticism of the amnesia gimmick until I saw how it played out, but man, there's so much things that would be less stupid than how this played out. I mean, the laziest way you could have done it is at the end of the tutorial style dungeon. The party interacts with some like magical artifact like an orb that's glowing, and then it's revealed that it was a cursed artifact that like wiped all their memories. So at least like when you touch the orb and it returns all your memories at once, it's like a dumb magic item gimmick. But the idea that their amnesia clears up when they meet the first NPC that recognizes them somehow just feels even dumber and lazier. And I was really hoping that they were just a new Dungeon Master, they didn't understand that they were making an unfun dungeon, and when the twist about the amnesia source is revealed, it just kind of feels like, hey, that wasn't the smartest way to do it, but I kind of see where you're coming from. I guess the one thing I'm wondering here is if you guys tried to do anything to resolve your conflict with the Dungeon Master, because you said it was someone that was your friend. But yeah, truth be told, it seems like there wasn't a lot to be redeemed here, so just inviting the rest of the people to your next game and then having a campaign that's much more healthy without the Dungeon Master is ultimately where the story was probably going to end up anyways. And this is definitely one of the most frustrating first 2 sessions I've seen for any new Dungeon Master, just from the pure perspective that everything that you could do feels like a loss and you're treated like almost a criminal for trying to play the game in a regular fashion. I really don't think you're too harsh here, and I want to hear what other people have to say, so make sure to comment below your thoughts. And if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to like and share to help the channel grow. And if you want to help the channel further, be sure to subscribe, and today's sponsor is a really great one. You're going to get a lot of bang for your buck when it comes to the bundle. In my own campaigns, I've actually used the maps and scenes for these guys, and my players always seem to love them, so if you can, please check them out. And as always, thanks for stopping by. I hope to see you in the next video. Farewell for now.